Hello, my name is Rowan Fisher and I work for Heritage and Culture Warwickshire. The strong rooms at the County Record Office in Warwick hold many recipe books, but probably one of the most famous is the recipe book belonging to Mary Wise, who married into the wealthy local Wise family in the 18th century. Today I will be talking about one of the recipes from her recipe book entitled A Most Excellent Medicine Against the Plague. Now, the Wise family had strong links with the area. Mary's father-in-law, Henry Wise, was royal gardener to Queen Anne, and in 1709 he bought Priory House, which some of you might recognise as the site of the modern-day County Record Office, and he landscaped the grounds around it. Mary married his second son and namesake, Henry Wise, in 1732. And this picture that you can see here shows the old building transposed against the modern building. The old building was actually sold for auction in the 1920s and went literally brick by brick to America. Anyway, moving on. So back to Mary's household recipe book. So in common with many housewives of the time, she started to keep a household book. And after Mary's death in 1760, it continued to be used and handed down through the family. The practice of keeping a household book was common at this time, as published recipe books were not available. Women learned the craft of running a household from their mothers. And one of the lovely things that I really like about this book is that recipes for gingerbread, collaring beef and pickling pigeons nestle side by side with medicinal recipes and recipes for homemade cosmetics, for example. Recipes were recorded in the order in which they were received and not split into sections in the way a modern-day recipe book would be. So Mary's plague medicine appears right before a recipe for cheesecakes, in fact. So here is Mary Wise's Most Excellent Medicine Against the Plague. We'll be looking at it in a bit more detail in a minute, but first I'd like to spend just a little while talking about the plague. The Great Plague of 1665, when half of England's population are estimated to have died, was barely within living memory around the time that Mary Wise was compiling her household book in the 1700s. But people then were still used to regular, smaller outbreaks of plague that often reached their height in the summer, when the warmer conditions allowed it to spread more easily. There was no cure for the plague, and people were only just beginning to make the link between the cramped, dirty conditions and the spread of plague. In addition, the term plague often covered more than one strain of the disease. In 1665, observers actually noted two different types of plague: bubonic plague, with the painful buboes which was spread by fleas on rats, and pneumonic plague, which was airborne and spread by sneezing. Those who could afford it fled the cramped, dirty towns where the infection spread easily for the countryside, often bringing the plague with them. In the absence of the medical knowledge that we have today, all sorts of theories abounded about what caused plague and how it could be prevented. Doctors still did not know what caused disease, and in any case, doctors were too expensive for most people. It was common to blame a miasma, or smell, and many people still believed that plague was a punishment from God for their sins. In terms of treatment, as well as simply fleeing, some patients were bled with leeches, some smoked tobacco to keep away the poisoned air, or sniffed a sponge soaked in vinegar. As you can see from this picture, there were even protective suits that could be worn by doctors of the time, 18th century PPE if you like, where the long snout was stuffed with sweet-smelling herbs. And these were some of the saner remedies. Many of the stranger remedies seem to involve cutting up bits of animals and strapping them to different parts of your body. When you consider all this, it is no wonder really that you find a recipe for the treatment of plague nestling inside Mary's household book. So let's take a look at the first part of the recipe. The handwriting is quite easy to decipher for our modern day eyes. Any recipe that starts "take 3 pints of muscadine wine" has got to be good in my opinion. This type of wine apparently comes from the muscadine grape variety native to America that has been used for making dry wine and port style wine since the 16th century. I'm not sure what medicinal properties this wine would have had, but many of her medicinal recipes use large quantities of alcohol as a base. If nothing else, it would have made the concoction more palatable and helped promote sleep and rest. Mary goes on to instruct that you should boil this with a handful of sage and a handful of rue till a pint is wasted, by which I think she means evaporated. I imagine most of us have heard of sage, usually used to flavour pork dishes nowadays, and I expect then also. It was very common to use herbs and spices for medicinal reasons in the past. They were affordable and accessible, and many of them genuinely worked. Our understanding of them is growing again, and sage is apparently full of vitamins, minerals and antioxidants, and is, some websites claim, good for everything from promoting oral health to treating menopausal symptoms. It doesn't mention plague though. Rue is much less common. It is a strong-smelling, bitter-tasting herb that was used for medicinal purposes in Mary's time, although large doses of it could be toxic. It may be that it was used as a purge, as it causes vomiting and is not safe to eat or handle. Mary's recipe asks us to strain the remaining mixture and set it on the fire again, remembering that she would have been cooking over either an open fire or an oven heated by a fire. She then says to add to this mixture long pepper, which is these things here, and also ginger and nutmeg, all ground into a fine powder and boiled a little. Long pepper, or Indian long pepper, is a flowering vine cultivated for its fruit, which is usually dried and used as a spice and seasoning, and it is still used medicinally today in certain parts of the world to improve appetite and digestion, as well as to treat stomach ache, heartburn, indigestion, intestinal gas, diarrhea and cholera. So it's no wonder that Mary thought it might be beneficial. Ginger too has a long history of being used medicinally. It has been used to help digestion, reduce nausea and help fight the flu and common cold. And nutmeg also has got many claimed health benefits, including aiding digestion and detoxifying the body. These ingredients, the wine, the ginger, the nutmeg, the rue, the sage and the long pepper, reflect those that would have been, if not common, at least obtainable in an upper-class household such as Mary's at the time. The richer households had, since medieval times and before, been benefiting from commodities brought to them by the spice trade. To finish off the recipe, Mary then advised adding 2 ounces of treacle, 1 ounce of something that I'm going to pronounce as mithridate, and 1/4 of a pint of angelica water. Black treacle, as well as being used in another of Mary's recipes for gingerbread, would also have been used medicinally, as it contains minerals including iron, manganese, calcium, copper and magnesium. Mithridate was a much rarer thing. It was a sugary medicine formed of many secret ingredients that is meant to offer immunity to poison, and it's named after Mithridates VI, the king of Pontus in the 1st century BC, who supposedly developed a tolerance to poisons. This would have been an expensive ingredient that Mary would have purchased, perhaps from an apothecary or chemist, and that chemist would have closely guarded their recipe. Angelica water, a little bit more common. Some of you may remember angelica in cooking in the 1960s and 1970s. Its leaves were often candied and cut up and used as decoration on jellies and cakes. It's fallen out of favour somewhat now. It has many medicinal uses as well and was a recognised treatment for plague. Mary suggests that her medicine is taken warm twice a day, a spoonful or 2 if you are actually suffering from the plague, and just half a spoonful if you wanted to use it as a preventative. I'm not going to comment on how effective or otherwise this most excellent medicine of Mary's would have been, as I have no medical expertise. Mary obviously believed in it and wrote, "Keep this as your life above all things. In the plague time under God trust to this. For there never was man, woman or child that is deceived. 'Tis good also in the smallpox, measles, surfeits or fevers." Here across the next 2 slides is a transcript of the recipe so that you can read it for yourself. I hope you've enjoyed finding out more about Mary Wise's most excellent medicine against the plague. Thank you.